Chapter 239. Peak of Kunlun Mountain. The dark-skinned man's aura was terrifying, but when he got within 100 feet of Xianku, he quietly turned into powder. This is... The peak grade 1 great grandmasters who were watching the show froze on the spot, unable to believe it. Although the dark-skinned man has only just entered peak grade 1, he has already taken that step. His internal strength has transformed, and he can easily sweep away a group of grade 1 great grandmasters. Even if it is a grade 1 great perfection who has transformed 3 times, it is impossible to kill him in an instant. What the hell is going on? Many peak grade 1 great grandmasters looked at each other, their faces solemn. It is simply unbelievable that the dark-skinned man suddenly fell to such a state. Is it Xianku from the Shaolin Temple? The old woman with a walking stick calmed down and whispered, "Xianku." The faces of the other peak grade 1 great grandmasters changed slightly. The old woman's suspicion is not unreasonable. The dark-skinned man was about to attack Xianku. If there is no connection between the two, who would believe it? Xianku does not have this strength. The old man in simple clothes shook his head. Although divine thoughts were suppressed in this place, with their eyesight, they could see that Xianku had not undergone any transformation. At most, he was only at the peak of grade 1. Not to mention killing the dark-skinned man, even blocking him would be extremely difficult. It is not Xianku. The old woman with a walking stick turned her eyes slightly and fell on the backs of Li Wan and Su Qin. Li Wan's aura is weaker than Xianku's. As for Su Qin, at this moment, Su Qin's back was facing everyone. Even the old woman could only see Su Qin's back. However, what made the old woman surprised was that Su Qin gave her a very strange feeling, as if he was an ordinary person. But can an ordinary person stand on the top of Kunlun Mountain? She is afraid that he would be crushed by the omnipresent pressure. Xianku, Shaolin Temple. The expressions of a small number of grade 1 great grandmasters changed slightly, as if they had thought of something, and their pupils shrank. At this moment, Xianku heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, when the dark-skinned man charged at him, the aura of a peak grade 1 had given him a lot of pressure. If not for Su Qin beside him, Xianku would have turned around and fled. Although Xianku was a disciple of the Shaolin Temple and had read all the Buddhist scriptures in the temple since he was a child, he was not a fool. He would not act rashly when he knew that he could not win. "Thank you for your help, Venerable One." Xianku bowed deeply to Su Qin. The dark-skinned man was a peak grade 1 great grandmaster. At this moment, he turned into powder for no reason. Only Su Qin, a venerable arhat, can do this. However, what Xianku did not know was that his actions had set off stormy waves in the hearts of many peak grade 1 great grandmasters. Venerable? All the peak grade 1 great grandmasters trembled and almost knelt down on the spot. They did not expect that the venerable arhat, who was said to have left the Shaolin Temple and crossed the sea, was standing in front of them. I should have thought that Xianku is only grade 1, yet he dares to come here. He must have something to rely on, and the biggest reliance of the Shaolin Temple is the venerable. The old woman with the cane smiled bitterly and quickly took a step forward until she was 100 feet away from Su Qin. Just when Xianku thought that the old woman was going to take action and avenge the dark-skinned man, the old woman with the cane bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, Venerable One." When the rest of the peak grade 1 saw this scene, they suddenly woke up from a dream. They secretly cursed the old woman for being a bootlicker. They quickly walked to the old woman's side and respectfully said, "Greetings, Venerable One." One by one, the peak grade 1 great grandmasters on the field stepped forward and saluted respectfully, as if they had seen a god. More than 20 years ago, Arhat walked out of the Shaolin Temple and it has long been spread all over the world. Many of the peak grade 1 great grandmasters on the field have already heard of it. Now that they have met Arhat himself, how could they dare not show respect? Third uncle, Li Wan blinked her big eyes. Of course, she knows that Su Qin is very strong, but at this moment, the respectful attitude of these people made her a little overwhelmed. "Huh? The peak of Kunlun Mountain is only enough for me to sign in once?" Su Qin ignored the many peak grade 1 great grandmasters who bowed and saluted him and sighed in his heart. Yesterday, he signed in for the first time at the peak of Kunlun Mountain and got a peach of immortality. He thought that he could continue to sign in here. If he can get dozens of peaches of immortality in a row and eat them consecutively, wouldn't he make a lot of money? But unfortunately, a day later, when today's sign-in opportunity refreshed, Su Qin found that he could no longer sign in at the peak of Kunlun Mountain. Could it be that the Kunlun Mountain here is not the Kunlun Mountain in the legends? Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look on his face. If it is really the ancestor of all mountains in the legends, the home of the gods, how can Su Qin sign in once exhaust its Dao accumulation? A peach of immortality that can prolong one's life is precious, but it is not comparable to divine arts such as Buddha's palm and 12 divine beasts diagram. Even an overseas island like Inzhou Island can let Su Qin sign in dozens of times, let alone Kunlun Mountain. The world's essence chi tide is recovering, the sky is getting higher and the earth is getting wider. This continent is expanding every moment. Maybe when the world's essence chi tide enters its peak, the real Kunlun Mountain will be revealed. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. In fact, in the past few years, as the recovery of the world's essence chi tide has become more and more intense, many places have shown extraordinary aspects. Su Qin sat in Chang and city and felt the world, faintly aware that something was being nurtured in several places. And just as Su Qin was thinking, many bowing peak grade 1 great grandmasters saw that Su Qin did not speak. Of course, they did not dare to get up. They all maintained their bowing posture with the respectful look. After a while, after Su Qin confirmed that sign-in at Kunlun Mountain is not possible, he slowly moved his gaze to the dozens of peak grade 1 great grandmasters. Seeing Su Qin looking at them, the peak grade 1 great grandmasters, led by the old woman with a walking stick, were shocked and said loudly again, "Greetings, Venerable." "You all get up." Su Qin's eyes were calm and he said lightly. With Su Qin's divine sense perception, he naturally discovered this group of peak grade 1 great grandmasters long ago, but he was too lazy to pay attention to them. These peak grade 1 great grandmasters can dominate the world, but in Su Qin's eyes, they are not much stronger than ants. Of course, he will not care too much about them. "The War God Temple belongs to me. Do you have any objections?" Su Qin looked at the peak grade 1 great grandmasters and said. Everyone he looked at, whether it was a peak grade 1 who has transformed once or a grade 1 great perfection who has transformed thrice, they all bowed their heads and said again and again, "No objection, no objection." According to the rules of the War God Temple in the past, 20 people are allowed to enter, but at this moment, Su Qin wants to occupy 20 spots by himself. It is simply overbearing. However, even so, no one dared to say the word, no. Even the old woman with the walking stick stood respectfully at her original spot. Everyone knew very well in their hearts that as long as they show any other thoughts, the dark-skinned man who was turned into powder would be a lesson to them. But among the many peak grade 1 great grandmasters, there were still a few who felt a trace of unwillingness in their hearts. They were about to be exhausted by Shoyuan, and they were counting on the appearance of the War God Temple to let them go further. Now that their hope was cut off by Su Qin, how could they be willing? However, even if these people had resentment in their hearts, they did not dare to show it. Instead, they lowered their heads deeply. The War God Temple is rare, and only the Venerable who stands at the peak of the world is qualified to enter. The old woman with a walking stick was about to speak. Suddenly, at this moment, rumble! A terrifying fluctuation slowly spread, and an incomparably magnificent picture slowly unfolded from the top of Kunlun Mountain. That is, the complexion of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster changed. He couldn't believe it. On the top of Kunlun Mountain, a majestic and vast palace slowly emerged, as if it had turned from illusion to reality. The interior of the palace was vast and boundless, and the top of the palace was engraved with stars. In every corner of the palace, there were countless strange flowers and grasses. War God Temple. The War God Temple has appeared. When the peak grade 1 great grandmasters saw this scene, they only felt inexplicable shock in their hearts. They had long known the way the War God Temple appeared from their respective ancient books, But the ancient books only recorded the words manifesting from the void, which was extremely abstract. How could it be as shocking as seeing it in front of everyone's eyes at this moment? This scene, which seemed to come from another world, simply crushed the perception of many martial artists on the scene over and over again. In the eyes of most martial artists, even if a grade 1 great perfection like Venerable Arhat can fight against 1,000,000 people, there is still a gap between him and the immortal gods in myths and legends. But at this time, when they saw the majestic and magnificent war god temple, a thought suddenly emerged in the minds of many martial artists. Perhaps the so-called immortal gods are just powerful martial artists? Legend has it that there is a great secret hidden in the depths of the war god temple. Unfortunately, with the protection of the demonic dragon, no one has been able to find out for thousands of years. The old woman with the walking stick calmed down and suppressed the trace of greed in her heart. Although the war god temple was good, it was not something she could touch. Now that Su Qin had announced the ownership of the war god temple, if these peak-grade great-grandmasters still had thoughts about the war god temple, it could only be said that they did not know what was good for them. Perhaps when the war god temple opens this time, the Venerable One can go to the depths of the war god temple. The old woman with the walking stick suddenly thought of something and carefully stole a glance at Su Qin. Although she had now given up on the idea of entering the war god temple, she still had great curiosity about the war god temple. For thousands of years, all the martial artists who entered the war god temple basically circled around the periphery. No one could pass the demonic dragon and enter the depths of the war god temple. But with the demonic dragon's protection, the Venerable One, thoughts appeared in the old woman's mind one after another. Just as everyone's attention was attracted by the war god temple, a trace of surprise flashed across Su Qin's face. Chapter 240. At the peak of Kunlun Mountain, the majestic war god temple emerged from the depths of the void, and a terrifying pressure quickly spread, enveloping the entire Kunlun Mountain in an instant. This war god temple doesn't seem to have left this world, but is hidden in the depths of space and will only appear at a specific time? Su Qin looked solemn. Just now, he had been observing the appearance of the war god temple with eyes of truth and celestial gazing aura. So he was naturally aware of some information about the war god temple. Under the aura of the war god temple, many other peak great-grandmasters' internal strength circulations slowed down. As expected of the war god temple. Just the aura unintentionally emitted can easily suppress us. A peak grade 1 great-grandmaster's eyes were fanatical as he muttered to himself. At this time, they were still some distance away from the war god temple. Once they enter the war god temple, their strength will probably be reduced to less than 10%. As time passed slowly, the originally illusory war god temple. Finally, at a certain point, it completely solidified. And the moment the war god temple was completely revealed, suddenly, several figures jumped out of thin air and rushed towards the war god temple at a terrifying speed. These figures were already very close to the war god temple. At this time, they suddenly burst out and caught the other peak great-grandmasters off guard. By the time they reacted, they had almost entered the war god temple. Venerable Arhat? I'm about to die of old age. At this time, even if it's the emperor, he can't stop me from entering the war god temple. The aura of these figures was powerful, at least a second transformation peak great-grandmaster, and one of them was even a third transformation peak grade 1 great perfection. The other peak great-grandmasters more or less have a decade of Shoyuan, so they naturally don't dare to disobey Su Qin, the invincible Venerable Arhat. But they are different. These peak great-grandmasters are similar to the evil emperor. They don't have many years left to live. The war god temple is their only hope. How can they give up so easily? For these peak great-grandmasters, their only chance of survival is to rush into the war god temple, seize the opportunity in the war god temple, and take that step as soon as possible to become a legend. In this way, even if they anger Su Qin, what can they do? Until then, Su Qin was Venerable Arhat. They were also martial arts legends. Everyone was a martial artist of the same level. Even if there was a gap, it wouldn't be too big. No one could do anything to the other. If he gave up on entering the war god temple, he would definitely die of old age. He staked everything on one throw and forced his way into the war god temple. Therefore, these great grandmasters who were nearing the end of their lifespans naturally knew how to choose. When the other peak grade 1 great grandmasters saw this scene, their complexions suddenly changed. These top martial artists who were rushing towards the war god temple ignored Su Qin's order. They simply didn't take Venerable Arhat, Su Qin, seriously. When Su Qin saw this, he frowned slightly. However, in the next moment, he seemed to have sensed something and did not immediately attack. Instead, a strange expression appeared on his face. Ha ha! We're in. After the few martial grandmasters rushed into the war god hall, they cried tears of joy. A smug look appeared on their faces. So what if he was Venerable Arhat? Wasn't he still being played around by them? Just when these martial grandmasters were planning to immediately head into the war god temple to look for a great opportunity. Roar! A dragon's roar that shook the world came. A huge demonic dragon hundreds of meters long slowly flew out from the depths of the war god temple. A faint dragon might emanated from the demonic dragon's body. Under this dragon might, the martial grandmasters who rushed into the war god temple only felt their hands and feet stiffen, and the internal strength in their body was suppressed to the point of almost stagnation. Fear burst out from the bottom of their hearts. These martial grandmasters wanted to turn around and escape from the war god temple, but under the dragon might, they couldn't even move, let alone escape. The next moment, under everyone's incredulous gaze, the demonic dragon opened its mouth lazily and swallowed the few top martial grandmasters who had rushed into the combat sacred hall. The audience was dead silent. All the martial grandmasters who saw this scene only felt their hands and feet go cold. Originally, a few martial grandmasters were still envious in their hearts, but at this moment, when they saw the fate of those who rushed into the war god temple, their faces suddenly turned pale. The martial grandmasters who rushed into the war god temple had at least completed 2 transformations, and one of them was even a grade 1 great perfection who had undergone 3 transformations. Even such a powerhouse ended up like this. If they entered the war god temple unprepared, they are afraid that they will also follow in their footsteps and be swallowed by the demonic dragon. Demonic dragon? This is the demonic dragon in the war god temple. Damn it, isn't the demonic dragon in a deep sleep? As long as we don't step into the depths of the war god temple, we won't attract its attention. Why did it take the initiative to come out this time? A martial grandmaster on the scene recognized the origin of the demonic dragon and exclaimed. When the other martial grandmasters heard this, their expressions turned ugly. Indeed, according to ancient records, the war god temple is guarded by the demonic dragon, but this demonic dragon spends most of its time sleeping and doesn't bother to pay attention to the martial artists who enter the war god temple. This is also the reason why those martial grandmasters rushed into the war god temple without any precaution. In their view, as long as they are careful and don't have any thoughts about the depths of the war god temple, they won't provoke the demonic dragon. But now, those martial grandmasters were swallowed by the demonic dragon as soon as they entered the war god temple, let alone entering the depths of the war god temple. Such a change is simply unprecedented. Idiot! Su Qin's eyes were calm, but a trace of contempt flashed across his face. The demonic dragon is sleeping because its vitality is declining, and it has no choice but to sleep to reduce the consumption of vitality. But no matter how much it sleeps, it will eventually consume some of its vitality. Especially after experiencing the silent era of the vitality tide, the demonic dragon has experienced a long period of consumption. Now that the war god temple has appeared, the first thing the demonic dragon does is naturally to look for replenishment. And in the world, who can replenish the demonic dragon's consumption better than the vitality of martial artists? Of course, the demonic dragon's eagerness to come out has something to do with Su Qin. Su Qin's body has undergone 5 transformations, and after mastering the picture of the Great Sun, he is close to undergoing the 6th transformation. His vitality is soaring, and no matter how much he tries to conceal it, he can't hide it from the demonic dragon in the war god temple. In the eyes of the demonic dragon, Su Qin is a delicious cake that exudes the fragrance of vitality. As long as it swallows Su Qin, it can at least prolong its existence for hundreds or thousands of years. However, the demon dragon did not have the confidence to deal with Su Qin. Naturally, it would choose to devour the few peerless grandmasters who had broken into the Temple of War to replenish some of its blood essence before thinking about how to devour Su Qin. Venerable one, this evil dragon is not weak, Xianku said with a grave expression. It's fine, Su Qin said casually. Compared to the many martial grandmasters present, the demonic dragon is not just not weak. It is simply crushing. The demonic dragon has been sleeping in the war god temple for countless years, and Su Qin knows that it has been tens of thousands of years. In tens of thousands of years, even a pig can rise against the trend, let alone the demonic dragon with an extraordinary bloodline. However, although the demonic dragon has the bloodline of a true dragon, Su Qin can feel that the vitality in the demonic dragon's body has declined to the limit. If it wasn't for the extraordinary bloodline of a divine beast, it would have died of old age many years ago. Moreover, under Su Qin's perception, he can roughly estimate the demonic dragon's strength. The peak of the 8th heaven. With the magical talent of the dragon clan, it is comparable to a 9th heaven legend. Roar! Just as Su Qin was thinking, a dragon's roar suddenly resounded through the world. Immediately after, this huge demonic dragon directly rushed out of the war god temple. The dragon body that is hundreds of meters long wantonly exuded an incredible dragon aura. In the end, the demonic dragon's huge blue eyes finally fell on Su Qin. A dragon and a human began to look at each other. In the eyes of the other grandmasters present, the demonic dragon is huge and boundless, and the dragon aura is unparalleled. Compared to the demonic dragon's size, Su Qin is not even comparable to an ant. The demonic dragon can be said to be looking down on Su Qin, but in fact, the two are looking at each other as equals. Moreover, as time passed, Su Qin's eyes were still deep and calm, like a bottomless abyss, while the demonic dragon became more and more anxious. The demonic dragon faintly realized that the human in front of him, whom he regarded as food, exuded an aura that made him a little uncomfortable. In the demonic dragon's memory, only the master of the war god temple gave him this feeling many years ago. At that time, the demonic dragon was originally free, but the master of the war god temple forcibly enslaved him and planted a restriction in his body, making him guard the war god temple for generations to come. Since then, the demonic dragon was no longer free. Instead, he was trapped in the war god temple for countless years. Scenes of the past flashed through the demonic dragon's mind. The demonic dragon became more and more anxious, and the dragon aura exuding from his body became more intense. You want to fight? Su Qin quietly looked at the demonic dragon, and a trace of mockery flashed through his eyes. As expected, Su Qin still overestimated this demonic dragon. In fact, this demonic dragon's intelligence was very low, and the trace of divine beast bloodline in his body was barely visible. Rather than calling him a dragon, it was more like a serpent. Roar! The demonic dragon finally couldn't take it anymore. Even if he felt threatened by Su Qin, he couldn't care less. Boom! At the peak of Kunlun Mountain, a terrifying heat spread wildly. In the demonic dragon's mouth, a cluster of pitch-black flames ignited out of thin air. The moment this cluster of pitch-black flames appeared, the world's essence chi began to riot and slowly melted. Under the burning of this cluster of pitch-black flames, even the world's essence chi seemed to be able to burn into nothingness. What is the demonic dragon doing? Why does that cluster of pitch-black flames give me such a terrifying feeling? That's right, my inner force is starting to burn. Not good, let's go. A peerless grandmaster on the scene exclaimed in disbelief. In their eyes, the cluster of flames in the demonic dragon's mouth seemed to have come from the abyss of hell, burning everything. The venerable is in trouble. The old woman with the walking stick calmed herself down and looked at Su Qin. Under this cluster of pitch-black flames, everything in the world was like fuel. It was terrifying. No matter how confident the old woman was in Su Qin, she didn't think that he could withstand this terrifying cluster of flames. The venerable Xianxia trembled. He only glanced at the cluster of pitch-black flames from afar, and he felt his inner force start to burn. In just a short moment he had lost more than half of his inner force. Third uncle, Liwan, was also scared. She looked at Su Qin, who was already invincible in her heart. Roar! The next moment, the demonic dragon finished brewing, and the cluster of pitch-black flames in its mouth suddenly surged. It spewed out and shrouded Su Qin. It's over. When the dozens of peerless grandmasters saw this scene, their hearts sank. After the demonic dragon killed Su Qin, its next target would probably be them. With the strength that the demonic dragon had shown, which martial artist present had the confidence to survive? You're playing with fire in front of me? At this moment, a smile appeared on Su Qin's face. He looked directly at the pitch-black flames that were rapidly shrouding him. In the depths of his eyes, there was a faint image of the sun hanging in the sky and the golden crow suppressing the world. Buzz! Under everyone's shocked gaze, the pitch-black flames that seemed to be able to burn everything quickly gathered within 10 feet of Su Qin. They floated and burned around Su Qin in an extremely obedient manner. Under the cover of the pitch-black flames, Su Qin's eyes were calm. He was like a god of fire, controlling all flames in the world. P.S. Please vote for me. Chapter 241. In front of the War God Temple, Su Qin stood with his hands behind his back. Within a radius of a few dozen meters around him, pitch-black flames gathered and slowly burned like stars surrounding the moon. The flames that the demon dragon spat out seemed to be able to burn everything. When they got close to Su Qin, not only did they not hurt him, they even broke free from the demon dragon's control. All the peerless grandmasters were stunned. The demon dragon had existed in the War God Temple for at least thousands of years. In their eyes, it had long surpassed ordinary mythical venerables. Even if Su Qin could block the flames spat out by the demon dragon, he must have exhausted all his means and might even be severely injured on the spot. But now, Su Qin just stood there and didn't even move, yet he was able to keep the demon dragon's flames within a few feet of him. What kind of method was this? What kind of ability was this? Venerable, Xianxia was also shocked. He was the closest to Su Qin and could see much more than the other peerless grandmasters. In Xianxia's eyes, Su Qin did not just block the dark flames, but also took control of the flames from the demon dragon. It was unbelievable. Compared to the shock of the others, Su Qin's expression was calm. He casually glanced at the black flames burning around him, then turned his gaze back to the demon dragon. What a pity! My picture of the great sun is only at the beginner level. At most, I can affect these flames and ensure that I will not be hurt. Su Qin thought silently. The beginner level of the picture of the great sun was limited to Su Qin. But if the picture of the great sun was at the beginner level, Su Qin could really control all the flames in the world. Before the demon dragon spat out the flames, Su Qin could directly detonate them. It was terrifying to the extreme. However, even the beginner level of the picture of the great sun was not something the demon dragon could deal with. The demon dragon wanted to kill Su Qin with the flames, which was no different from letting a fish drown. Roar! The demon dragon's blue eyes flashed with a very human-like surprise. It seemed to be wondering why the dark flames it spat out would change like this. The next moment, the demonic dragon stretched its body. Its two horns were like swords, piercing straight into the sky. Its sharp claws shone with a cold light, and its black scales had a cold metallic luster. Even though its qi and blood were deteriorating, the aura in its body was still like a suppressed volcano that could erupt at any time. It was far from what an ordinary legend could withstand. Rumble! The demonic dragon stood in front of the war god shrine, and a terrifying aura spread out as it silently charged towards Su Qin. Although the demonic dragon was not a real divine dragon, the bloodline that flowed in its body was related to the divine dragon. It contained all kinds of incredible potential, and its physical body was extremely strong. Because of this, even though Su Qin easily blocked the black flames that it spewed out, the demonic dragon didn't care at all. This was because it hadn't used its most powerful attack yet. At that moment, Everyone else saw a terrifying scene. The demon dragon that was hundreds of meters long seemed to have turned into a black bolt of lightning that swept through everything in the world, and even the air started to distort. As for Su Qin, in this vast scene, Su Qin was as inconspicuous as a speck of dust. Master, Shen Ku's heart tightened, and his face was full of worry. Third uncle is invincible. Li Wan next to him wasn't so worried. Although she was frightened by the demonic dragon that swooped down, Li Wan had absolute confidence in Su Qin. The other peerless grandmasters felt their legs go weak. Compared to the black flames just now, the demonic dragon rushed towards Su Qin personally. Its huge dragon body covered the sky and was far more shocking than the black flames. Su Qin didn't say anything. He directly pulled out a strange sickle-shaped blade that was curved like a full moon from the void and slashed at the demonic dragon without hesitation. Heaven and earth seemed to have transformed into a pitch-black ocean, with only a streak of light that looked like a spatial crack slashing through the air. A wound appeared on the demonic dragon's huge body. The blade light from the demonic blade directly penetrated the demonic dragon's body. Roar! The demonic dragon roared violently in pain. Unfortunately, although the blade light from the demonic blade was a few meters long, which was enough to cut a person in half, the demonic dragon's body was too huge. It was hundreds of meters long, and a wound of a few meters was insignificant on such a huge dragon body. If it wasn't for the demonic blade's aura that seemed to come from the abyss of hell that spread wildly to other parts of the body, the wound would have healed in a few seconds. Slash again. Su Qin didn't hesitate. He held the demonic blade and slashed several more times. The blade light flashed like a spatial rift, and almost instantly, it was close to the demonic dragon. This time, the demonic dragon learned to be smart. It knew that its body couldn't block the demonic blade. Its body suddenly turned into a black shadow and dodged several slashes from the demonic blade. This scene left everyone dumbfounded. The dignified war god temple's guardian demon dragon was actually afraid of Su Qin's saber. It was simply shocking. That blade. A great grandmaster's eyes fell on the demonic blade in Su Qin's hand, and his heart trembled. Although they didn't know why a Buddhist venerable like Su Qin used a blade as a weapon, at this moment, the blade light slashed out by this blade was so sharp that it could destroy everything. He's not that stupid after all. Su Qin saw that the demonic dragon didn't dare to confront the demonic blade head-on, and a smile appeared on his face. The demonic blade was obtained by Su Qin when he signed in the cave world. It was said to have some relationship with the supreme demon god in the depths of the world. Su Qin hadn't found any existence that could block the blade light slashed out by the demonic blade. Even the heaven and earth great formation outside Immortal Abode Island that was set up by an earth immortal like Lord Donghai was cut in half by the demonic blade. In that case, Su Qin put away the demonic blade, took a step forward, stood in the air, and walked towards the demonic dragon. What? Many great grandmasters widened their eyes in disbelief when they saw this scene. The demonic dragon was originally good at close combat. If Su Qin wanted to deal with the demonic dragon, the best way was to distance himself from the demonic dragon and continuously use the blade in his hand to consume the demonic dragon. But now, Su Qin was actually rushing straight towards the demonic dragon? When the demonic dragon saw this scene, a trace of excitement flashed in its huge dragon eyes. It was still hesitating on how to approach Su Qin, but the other party directly took the initiative to approach it. Buzz! The demonic dragon's huge dragon body suddenly bloomed with endless power of qi and blood. Vaguely, a dragon shadow appeared and roared towards the sky. The terrifying aura suppressed the entire Kunlun Mountain. At this moment, all the living beings on Kunlun Mountain had a vague urge to kneel down. It was as if the suppression from the essence of life made the minds of countless living beings go blank. The demonic dragon was obviously going all out. Its qi and blood were already declining. If it stimulated its qi and blood power like this, it was simply courting death. However, as long as it could devour Su Qin and absorb Su Qin's huge qi and blood vitality, it would definitely make a huge profit. Not only would it be able to live for hundreds or thousands of years, but it might even be able to break free from the shackles of the War God Temple and regain its freedom. After all, after tens of thousands of years, even the War God Temple couldn't exist forever. It was already in a state of extreme decline. Otherwise, the demonic dragon wouldn't have come to the War God Temple. However, in the face of such a scene, Su Qin's expression was still calm and indifferent. He raised his right hand slightly. Su Qin slowly stretched out his palm. From the moment he stretched out his palm to the moment it landed, its aura changed constantly. There was the 5 Thunder God Fist, the vast Buddhist Pearl Demon subduing divine art, and the endless and profound 9 notes of the demonic path. In an instant, at least hundreds and thousands of peerless divine arts were revealed from this palm. These peerless divine arts had been completely mastered by Su Qin, and they had even surpassed the realm of the Creator. In the end, these hundreds and thousands of peerless divine arts were all merged into one and merged into Su Qin's palm. Coupled with his huge qi and blood body, it could be said that he could already exert 50% of Su Qin's strength. Su Qin's palm power was restrained to the extreme. In the eyes of outsiders, it was just an ordinary palm. Compared to the scene where the demonic dragon stimulated its qi and blood and even faintly summoned the dragon shadow that reached the sky, it was simply insignificant, like dust. However, the next moment, the two silently collided with each other. A terrifying power suddenly erupted as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. Strands of fluctuations spread out in all directions with Su Qin and the demonic dragon as the center. Su Qin's outstretched palm remained motionless. The power of hundreds and thousands of peerless divine arts gathered together was undoubtedly displayed at this moment. It was enough to crush an 8th heavenly layer legend and shake a 9th heavenly layer legend. Boom! Under everyone's shocked gazes, Yi Zichen's expression changed. The demonic dragon's huge body began to crack under Su Qin's palm, and horrifying wounds appeared one after another. If it wasn't for a faint light that appeared in the demonic dragon's body at the critical moment, it would have been torn apart. The entire place was dead silent. All the peerless grandmasters were stunned on the spot. No one had thought that Su Qin would be so terrifying that even the demonic dragon, who had been guarding the War God Temple until now, could not withstand his palm. Ha ha ha! Awesome! Again. After Su Qin struck with his palm, the battle intent in his heart slowly boiled. A surge of vitality that was comparable to or even stronger than the demonic dragon appeared and shrouded the entire place. Su Qin strode forward and walked directly toward the demonic dragon. He raised his right hand again and slowly grabbed down. The demonic dragon let out a wail. At this moment, how could it not know that it was no match for Su Qin? It didn't even have the qualifications to fight with Su Qin. Immediately afterward, the demonic dragon turned into black lightning again and fled into the War God Temple. It had been scared witless by Su Qin. If it continued to stay, it was afraid that it would really die. It ran away? Su Qin frowned slightly. It had to be said that the demonic dragon's speed when it turned into black lightning was extremely fast. Ordinary mythical legends might not even be able to catch it. If it wasn't for Su Qin's domain, they might not have been able to react. Do you think you can run away? Su Qin's body emitted a light that was like the sun. It overlapped and finally condensed into a golden sun. Su Qin stood in the center of the sun. A 3-legged divine bird that was burning with flames flew up, exuding a strong, immortal, and eternal aura. With the blessing of this 3-legged divine bird, Su Qin's aura rose infinitely. He reached out his right hand and easily grabbed the demonic dragon. Then, with a pull of his left hand, the demonic dragon that was hundreds of meters long was torn in half. Black dragon blood with surging aura fell from the sky. No matter how the demonic dragon struggled, it was easily torn apart by Su Qin's hands like thin paper. In the 9th year of the Empire of Tang, Su Qin tore the demonic dragon apart at the peak of Kunlun Mountain. Chapter 242. The demon dragon was dead. After the massive dragon body was torn apart by Su Qin, a dim divine sense appeared. It wanted to charge into the War God Temple, but it was stopped by Su Qin, who was already prepared. Then, it was completely reduced to ashes, its body and soul destroyed. The demon dragon was very strong. Even if its vitality was declining and Shouyuan was close, ordinary mythical legends didn't even have the ability to resist in front of the demon dragon. If it wasn't for the restriction of the war god temple, all the creatures on the continent would have been slaughtered. Especially at the last moment, when the demonic dragon stimulated his qi and blood, the combat strength he displayed had already reached the level of a 9th heaven legend. His ferocity was unparalleled, and in the era when the vitality tide was still, such combat strength was absolutely invincible. Unfortunately, the demon dragon met Su Qin. Su Qin's body had almost completed 6 transformations. The strength of his body alone had definitely reached the level of an Earth Immortal. Ordinary Earth Immortals were even inferior to Su Qin in terms of physical strength. Although the demon dragon had the bloodline of a divine beast, Su Qin also cultivated the picture of the great sun. To some extent, Su Qin's divine beast aura was stronger than the demon dragon's. In addition, the demon dragon's vitality had already declined. Although it was barely activated, it was far from being able to crush Su Qin. In the end, it was killed by Su Qin with hundreds of thousands of peerless divine arts and supplemented by the picture of the great sun. In fact, if the demon dragon was still alive, Su Qin would really consider using the Buddha's palm. After decades of meditation, Su Qin had completely mastered the first move of the Buddha's palm, the unique and righteous. Once used, the sky and earth would be enveloped by the light of Buddha. This was known as the strongest divine art passed down by Buddha. Even Su Qin didn't know what the upper limit of its power was. But the flesh of the demon dragon can be collected. Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look on his face. And just as Su Qin was thinking, everyone on the scene looked at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded. Oolong is dead? The old woman with the walking stick swallowed hard. She raised her head and looked at Su Qin, who was standing in the air with his hands behind his back. Her heart was in turmoil. This was a devil dragon. This demonic dragon had existed since the war god temple's first appearance. It had lived for countless years since ancient times and had long surpassed the terrifying divine beast that was a martial arts legend. Such an existence had actually died? Furthermore, it had died in such an insignificant manner that it could not even put up a decent struggle before it was torn apart on the spot and its dragon blood scattered everywhere. Gulp. At the summit of Kunlun Mountain, the hands and feet of some of the peak great grandmaster-level martial sages who had other thoughts turned cold when they saw this scene, feeling like they had fallen into an abyss. After the demon dragon was born, they were not shocked, but rather delighted. If it wasn't for the demon dragon, no one would have dared to refute Su Qin's words of, "The war god temple belongs to me." But the mystic dragon gave them some leeway. Some of the peak great grandmaster-level martial sages present did not hope that the mystic dragon could kill Su Qin, but it could at least stall Su Qin or severely injure Su Qin so that both sides would suffer. This way, Su Qin would be powerless to stop them from entering the war god temple. And inside the war god temple, without the demon dragon's protection, the great opportunity in the deepest part of the temple would be at their disposal. It was the best of both worlds. And just as everyone was in shock, Su Qin had already begun to prepare to collect the dragon blood and dragon meat scattered on the ground. The demon dragon of the war god temple, to be precise, could not even be considered a flood dragon. It could only be said that it had a trace of a true dragon's aura. It was precisely under the influence of this aura that it could grow to this day and survive in the war god temple until now. One had to know that even the monster race's Shouyuan was far superior to the human race, let alone the demon dragon. However, compared to the human race, the cultivation speed of the other races was much slower. The peerless geniuses of the human race might reach the Earth Immortal realm in a few hundred years, but the monster race would probably need to spend more than 1,000 years to reach this realm. If I absorb all of this dragon blood and dragon meat, I might be able to complete my 6th metamorphosis. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. Now that his physical body had almost completed the 6th metamorphosis, If he bathed in dragon blood, he might be able to go one step further and complete the sixth metamorphosis. Of course, this was also because the demon dragon of the war god temple was not at a high level. Coupled with the fact that its vitality was declining, the essence contained in the dragon blood and dragon meat was extremely limited. Although it was somewhat helpful to Su Qin, it was not a qualitative change. Otherwise, if it was a full-grown demon dragon or a real flood dragon, it would still be very helpful to Su Qin. Not to mention completing the seventh metamorphosis of his physical body, but at least he would be able to take a step toward the seventh metamorphosis. There's too much dragon blood and dragon meat. Su Qin enveloped the entire peak of Kunlun Mountain with his domain and frowned slightly. The demon dragon was hundreds of meters long, and its dragon body covered the sky. After Su Qin tore apart the demon dragon's body, the dragon blood that spilled out was at least tens of thousands of pounds. Coupled with the demon dragon's body, it was probably the size of a small mountain. Although this weight was not worth mentioning to Su Qin, it would be extremely troublesome to carry it around. As for the system space that Su Qin had, the system space could only accommodate the treasures obtained from the system sign-in. As for other things, it could not be stored in. Let's refine it directly. Refine all the impurities in the dragon blood and dragon meat. Su Qin suddenly made a decision in his heart. The next moment, with a thought in Su Qin's mind, all the dragon blood and dragon meat within the domain began to slowly gather towards him. At this moment, a cluster of flames suddenly appeared in front of Su Qin's eyes. This cluster of flames was the 9-yang divine fire condensed by Su Qin using the 9-yang divine art. In addition, when Su Qin cultivated the Great Sun diagram, he faintly contained the aura of the three-legged golden crow, causing the power of the 9-yang divine fire to skyrocket by several levels. Refining the flesh and blood of the fallen demon dragon was completely done by him. Voila! A large amount of dragon blood was burned by the 9-yang divine fire, and a large amount of black dragon blood continued to decrease. When the other great grandmasters in the distance saw this scene, they only felt that the shock in their hearts was simply indescribable. Not only did Su Qin forcibly tear apart the demon dragon, but he also refined all the dragon blood and dragon meat of the demon dragon with a raise of his hand. One must know that even if the demon dragon had fallen, there was still a terrifying aura within its flesh and blood. Even if an ordinary myth could refine it, it would take decades to do so step by step. But Su Qin directly refined all the dragon blood and dragon blood with some kind of flame. Buzz. Time passed. Half an hour later, under the burning of the 9-yang divine fire, the dragon blood that weighed tens of thousands of pounds was reduced to only 9 drops. These 9 drops of dragon blood were as black as ink, and vaguely, there seemed to be a dragon-shaped shadow roaring in them. Not bad. Su Qin nodded slightly with a satisfied look. These 9 drops of dragon blood were the most precious thing in the body of the demon dragon that was hundreds of meters long. Moreover, the terrifying aura in the dragon blood had been removed by Su Qin. If an ordinary person were to absorb it, they would definitely be reborn and their physical body would be far stronger than those of the same level. They could even reach the level of a myth with their physical body. Su Qin only glanced at the 9 drops of dragon blood, then took out a jade bottle and put all the dragon blood into it. He then carried it with him, preparing to consume the dragon blood after returning to Chang and City and completely complete the 6th transformation of his physical body. After everything was ready, Su Qin glanced at Xianku and Li Wan and said casually, "I'm going to the War God Temple. If I don't come out in 10 days, you can go back by yourselves." Xianku and Li Wan looked at each other and immediately replied. "As for you?" Su Qin glanced at the many peak grade 1 great grandmasters and said lightly, "You can all go back." Venerable. All the peak grade 1 great grandmasters bowed and then slowly left the top of Kunlun Mountain under Su Qin's gaze. Rise. Su Qin looked around and saw a heaven and earth great array surrounding the entire Kunlun Mountain. This heaven and earth great array was not a killing array, but it was enough to stop all martial artists below the 4th heavenly layer. Even if a 6th or 7th heavenly layer legend breaks in, they will be trapped for a while. In addition, once the Great Array is touched, Su Qin will know immediately even if he is in the War God Temple. It's time to enter the War God Temple. Su Qin slowly raised his head and looked at the majestic and magnificent War God Temple. Now that the demon dragon in the War God Temple has fallen in the hands of Su Qin, it stands to reason that the War God Temple should be unimpeded for Su Qin. Thinking of this, Su Qin took a step forward and his figure appeared in front of the War God Temple, then took another step and entered the War God Temple. Inside the War God Temple, the world's essence, chi, and spiritual vigor are far more abundant than on the mainland, not much weaker than Immortal Abode Island. Su Qin's gaze constantly swept through the strange flowers and grasses in the corners that do not exist in the outside world, as well as the top of the Great Hall engraved with stars. Now that the world's essence chi is abundant and spiritual vigor is everywhere, how can the War God Temple be spied on by an earth immortal? Su Qin slowly released his divine sense and constantly covered all directions. Lao Dao scholars once said that in the previous essence chi recovery era, several Earth Immortals had designs on the War God Temple, but they were chased out in disgrace. 4 Earth Immortals, as long as they put in the effort, they could have as much essence chi and spiritual vigor as they wanted. For example, the Heaven and Earth Great Formation that Lord Donghai had set up allowed Immortal Abode Island to survive the essence chi recovery period. Although the spiritual vigor spring played a part in it, it was undeniable that Earth Immortals did not care about essence chi and spiritual vigor. Su Qin suddenly seemed to have discovered something. His domain quickly spread out, and the last jade stone appeared before Su Qin. This is the jade stone that records cultivation methods. Su Qin's divine sense probed it and found that there was a mythical-level divine skill stored within the jade stone. This should be the great opportunity in the eyes of the martial artists who entered the War God Temple in the past. Su Qin guessed. A mythical-level divine skill, coupled with abundant essence chi and spiritual vigor, it was no wonder that countless martial artists fought over it. By the way, I have also entered the War God Temple. I should be able to sign in here. Su Qin's eyes narrowed slightly. He raised his head and glanced around. System, sign in. Su Qin thought for a moment and said in his heart, "Congratulations, host, for signing in successfully. You have received Essence Spirit Pill X1. P.S. Please, 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 I beg for monthly votes. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.